Washington's medical cannabis industry, it's estimated that there were over 3,000 access points for medical marijuana patients. The medical cannabis community was strong and its cottage-based economy was thriving. This allowed people from the cannabis community to earn a living from their work and turn their passion into an enterprise. For the first time, local and federal governments were able to get a realistic view of the wide popularity of cannabis and its potential for tax revenue. African Americans have long been targeted by law enforcement in the criminal justice system through cannabis prohibitions. Blacks were arrested at 4 times the rate of whites for cannabis violations, as well as convicted and sentenced to incarceration at disproportionate rates. On November 6, 2012, Washington State passed I-502, paving the way for the legalization and the regulated sale of recreational cannabis. Since legalization, tax revenues have steadily increased to currently well over $1 billion, with no signs of slowing down. This tax revenue has been a windfall for Washington State, but this has come at a terrible human price, leaving in its wake a tragic aftermath of devastation and trauma. Regulation has allowed politicians, bureaucrats, and law enforcement who once opposed, oppressed, and preyed on the cannabis community to perform an extremely hostile takeover of Washington's cannabis trade. Once the legislators and their big money backers decided to get into the cannabis business, they were ruthless in their invasion.
They scared the fuck out of black folks, and they dispersed us. You know, no different than riding up in a town of black people and doing a peaceful picnic outside, and they come up shooting their guns, and everybody's scattering so they don't get hit with the bullet. And that's exactly how it's the same tactics, man. It's no different than the Wild Wild West and the racist Ku Klux Klan riding into town, shooting their guns. Cops up there holding press meetings, looking all mean, mugging, semi-automatics, big SWAT team van behind them. You know, all that display, all that energy coming out to you, you know. And of course, these black people are like, ooh, they're going to come in and they're going to get us. And we can't show unification. We can't go down there. He's asking you to go to Olympia. He might be working with the police, man. You know, all that there. You feel me? We were up against all that. You know, and they were scared, and they had every right to be, because they had conditioned us to be scared. You know what I mean? You know, they had conditioned us to stay away from weed, because weed, man, like, you're going to be taken away, you're going to go away, you're not going to be with your family. You know, it just was bad. You go to court, everybody's looking at you like you just killed somebody, or, you know, it's that bad, that stigma with us and weed here. And on a whole different level, when they kids were getting caught with weed, it was always, here, you know, here, give me that. Go home. You know, that kind of attitude. And you never seen them in court for weed, you know. But we know for a fact that we were in prison, in jails for weed, for marijuana. And I'm not even talking during the crack epidemic. You know, it was anything then. But weed has always been the issue in Washington State when it comes to black people. You know, it's just a fact. Because King County wasn't the place to do anything with weed back in 2004. They were riding around with patrols, and just look at some of the articles. They were actually blowing people's doors open for weed. You know, he's got a pound of weed in there. You know, really. It was kicking your door in for a pound of weed with the SWAT team in the whole 9 yards. Yet you had the white dispensaries going down fighting to pay $1 million in taxes. You know, if they're paying $1 million in taxes, they're pulling in like $10 million. So that's a lot of business. That's a lot of activity. I mean, any law enforcement agency should say, damn, what the hell is going on over there? Look at all that traffic, right? The black dispensaries weren't even pulling in a fraction of that. And they were more scrutinized than anything. And for everything. You know what they did in Seattle? They had a thing that they were doing, a sting, where they were sending in people in there to buy underage, the dispensaries. Well, they just only predominantly did that in the black area. I mean, come on. I mean, everything that you do is just happen to be with it. The feds just bother us. You know, it's everything that we did with the weed, no matter what it was.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Jung. I've been a liquor enforcement officer with Washington State Liquor Control Board since March 2008. For the past 11 years, I personally witnessed and have been directed to participate in what I would consider to be unfair and inconsistent application of policies, procedures, and laws to the public. These variations are not limited to marijuana unit, but other areas of LCV enforcement. As a matter of fact, I've been raising these concerns with agencies since 2014 without much success. I've heard many stories from licensees about their unfair treatment by enforcement and/or license division. When I instructed them to file a formal complaint, including to the FBI, they all fear they'll be targets of retaliation by the board. What's truly sad is the fact that the majority of these business owners are minorities or immigrants, simply trying to make a better life for themselves and their family. I have detailed example of false warrant, inconsistent application of warrants and policies, to name a few. We have banners now in our offices that says police. We are given uniforms with the patches that says police. I have never been through a certification course in CJTC that says I'm a Washington State peace officer. Yet I'm supposed to wear that, carry a gun, pretend that I'm a cop. And there are quite a bit of officers right now that are non-peace officers in Washington State that are carrying firearms concealed for our work. And based on my research and my attorney, they're in violation of the state law. This is just a scratch in the surface right now with the internal. You know, there was an article not too long ago that indicated that the LCB has a toxic culture. It's very true. I'm here to testify that.
This state should be leading the way in diversity, and instead, with cannabis, we're leading the way with really just greed and discrimination.
We want our children to have things. We want to pass down things to our children. So we don't want to be left out. We got locked up for it. They had the way for being locked up for it. These are facts. Percentages speak for themselves. Now at least let us sit at the table or even lead the way for having stores for injustice that has been done for a long time.
As the comparison was undertaken before and after 502 implementation, and pointed out that more black and brown people were being arrested and convicted, it was the same after the implementation. And nobody blinked an eye. No one is blinking yet. And we are here trying to call attention to what we think is an imperative. It is mandatory to look at this. It is important not to pay lip service to it. What gets measured gets done. We're not measuring it. I think you will agree that in Washington, Colorado, and other states where marijuana has been legalized, part of the impetus has always been related to racial disparities in the criminal justice system, the unfairness with which black and brown people have been persecuted through state laws for using or possession or consumption of marijuana products. Part of the rationale for establishing a legal regime was to rectify or reverse that problem. But unfortunately, that has not been a priority here in Washington. Part of that disparity is magnified in the criminal justice system, but part of it is also reflected in the kinds of stores and grow operations and cultivations and production and processing facilities in the state, where you do not find African American, Latino, or other minority groups well represented at all.
If you look at the makeup of the larger cannabis community, there are certain minority groups that suffer greatly under prohibition that are horribly underrepresented in the regulatory model. It goes without saying that there are very few African American operators in the state of Washington at any level, at any function, and that is shocking when you look at the disproportionate rate at which African Americans suffered under prohibition. They were prosecuted at a much higher rate, incarcerated at a much higher rate, but yet they're underrepresented.
And the land is dark.